stuff. It's, you hear people sometimes like, it's like,
this is good enough.
Yeah.
It's good enough. You
It's
don't
not
want
meant
to
to
do
be
too
there.
much. The man, the myth, the legend, he's back. Are you still the most feared man by Australian pedophiles?
most hated.
Most
and yes,
hated.
Still
Fear,
am.
hate, still around.
Still going. They haven't got me yet.
Still kicking.
Still trying. Now I'm going after institutions as well. So
Institutions as in...
churches,
Thank
scouts,
God.
sporting clubs. There was a High Court decision last November that basically came down and said that institutions are no longer liable for the acts of volunteers. So I've already started the ball rolling to get the states to legislate around that to make sure that these trillion-dollar institutions are finally accountable and they're not passing the buck on to us, the taxpayer.
Yeah, see, it's such a weird thing. See, I'm not a religious person at all, like even in the slightest. I've no incline or like inkling that Jesus was like I just don't believe in it. But if it makes you a better person as a person to believe and have faith in certain things, whatever faith it may be, good on you. But a lot of them, like there's massive cases of pedophilia around, especially like Catholic churches and just even like places like scouts clubs and stuff like that. This is where all of it's a breeding ground for pedophilia.
Well, the stats are it's 80% incestual and 92% known. So you're most likely to be abused by a father, grandfather, uncle, and then the 92% known, it's, scout leader, godfather's a big one. But yeah, it's not widely reported on because you cannot identify the offender if it identifies the victim survivor. So that's why you hear sometimes of, a southern suburbs father of two is in court for abusing a child. And it's the unfortunate reality where there's no good story for the media report on that. So it's going to be a throwaway article or it's going to be a 20-second story on the news. You very rarely see an in-depth story on something like this because you can't legally identify the victim survivor.
51.85% today of matters in the District
Court of South Australia is related
District
to
Court of South Australia child abuse cases.
Yeah, it's
is that not fucking retarded?
It's insane. I started this weekly series about I think last January or last February.
Yeah, I believe I was watching it every week.
Yeah, and I always had people say, "Oh, I've been in this area of field for about 13 years now."
Yeah.
And I never like bring it up. I never, it's not a conversation starter, but I started seeing how actually bad it was. And so last January, I thought I might just check the court list. And I collated a list over a week of the percentages of people. And it was about 25% per average. And then there was a reporter that actually took that on and did a news.com story on it. And people were like, that's disgusting. And I had a lot of people saying, you should do it every week. And last year, I think it was November, it was the highest day last year was 41.2 or 42.1%. One of the two in court that day was rated child sexual abuse. And the leading story on the news that night was a politician trying to get a Hungry Jack's restaurant banned from being built within like a kilometre of a school because, fast food, bad. And I'm sitting there thinking...
Well, fucking raping children's worse.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I started doing this... I started the law change of super survivors 5 years ago. I've been advocating whenever there's a loophole that's being exploited.
Was this the one we were talking about on the previous podcast with the superannuation?
Yeah, how offenders basically, when they're about to get sued...
hide their money, all of their super.
Like there was there's a guy that I dealt with a while ago that he had $3 million in super... or almost $3 million in super from selling a business, and he got found guilty and got a suspended sentence, which was shocking in itself. And when we went to sue him, he said, I'll just sell my house, you get nothing. Like, you got $3 million in super. Like, you're not a guy that's going to claim poor over this, and it's another weaponise that offenders are having against victim survivors by simply saying, we're going to keep controlling the narrative, where I saw, was actually when I first sent my oldest son to childcare all those years ago, where I've gone, wow, I finally have to trust someone with my kids. And that's when I started trying to make it as hard as it can. And people are shocked to hear that it's never happened to me. I was never abused as a kid. When I became a lawyer, there was a file in one of my old firms that no one wanted to touch. And I was like, well, I'll do it. and saw how much it meant for someone to be believed and also to get justice. Because the conviction rate for historical abuse is every 1,000 reports, only 100 get investigated by police, 6 get convicted, and 3 get overturned on appeal. So I did a talk with Grace Tame in Melbourne about a year ago, and I wrote the speech literally an hour before I went on, and I was like, what's the most trusted news source in Australia? Sportsbet. Went on Sportsbet, and I was like, right, well, conviction rate of conviction rate of 0.003%. The closest stats I could find to that day was 100 to 1 of Pauline Hanson become the next Prime Minister of Australia.
That's crazy.
And if you think how remote that is of occurring, that's how likely it is for you to get away with this. And so I thought, if you can hit them where the hip pocket where it hurts and try to deter it, like look at all the new mobile phone laws where if you touch your phone in the car or the detection cameras, it's $1,000 on the spot fine. Everyone uses their phone on the car. I don't do it driving just because it's so dangerous.
One of my friends got pinged with his phone on the fucking seat.
Yeah.
And he can't dispute it. He's like, yeah, it was on the seat and it was fucking on. I didn't touch it. That's just where I put my phone.
Yeah, if it's on your lap, if you're touching your body, you're cooked. But the reason why most of us aren't driving whilst texting is because we're worried about the financial impact. The cops cannot fine every single person that uses their phone because it'll be inundating courts and fines units on that. But the reason why we do it is a deterrent. Now, if you're that likely to get away with this offending, I thought, why don't I try and find a way to deter this from occurring? Because you do not want to lose everything you worked for, and the easiest way to do that is change laws to make sure that it relates to this and this cause only of child abuse, because there's no other standalone crime that is like this. There's no legal justification for an abuse of a 7-year-old.
Do you think that the 51.85% could also, I don't want to say be a pro thing, but it could be more people coming out and actually voicing what happened to them?
Yeah, it takes an average 29.4 years to report what's happened.
Because I don't think pedophilia and child abuse would be like happening more now. I just think it's getting uncovered more. I think it is more rampant.
There was a study from I think it was September 2023, the Australian Maltreatment Study, that said 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday.
Really?
So out of an average 30-student classroom, that's 8 students likely to be abused. And there was a report back in New South Wales in about 2022 that said abuse matters since 2010 have gone up 4.5% per year. And so that encapsulates whether it's in-person, dissemination material. You look at for instance, the amount of people getting busted for exploitation material, and we call it exploitation material instead of child porn because porn denotes consent. A child cannot consent, so by virtue it's exploitation material. You never see guys getting arrested with 1 or 2 images. It's literally guys with hundreds of thousands, and I don't know, like a terabyte's 1,000
fucking gigs. If you have that in pictures and video, I'll tell you now, this is a terabyte here. I can record 500 podcasts on that.
Yeah,
2 hour long.
And it's not just, average blow like you and I. I dealt with one guy that, this was probably 11 or 12 years ago. He was in his 70s and he had material back then from accessing the dark web. And you think, my mum can't even open an iPhone without, me trying to help and show her what to do. And if you grew up in the 50s, 60s, you're not technologically savvy. And for someone to be able to access the dark web at that age to
learn how to do it.
Exactly.
They must be really wanting to see it.
And it's, you look at it, say if you see a bikie or a drug dealer get arrested, the first thing you do is you see a news crew at their house and they're recording their cars getting taken away.
SWAT.
Yeah, but all these offenders that you see, that they're normally, middle-aged married men or young single men, that they're on there's one guy that was arrested, he was a teacher, and yet he was going overseas 2 or 3 times a year, had a nice brand new car, and he had all this material. And you're thinking, you can't afford holidays, you can't afford a brand new car on your wage. What are you getting for those images? So it's literally they're actually monetizing them. And
there was that massive case in Morphett Vale.
Jad Brooker.
Is that his name? Not too long ago, where the police actually found him from he had hundreds and hundreds of videos of him abusing children.
The FBI was after him for years, and they managed to find him because he had a little birthmark right inside of his stomach, a little dot, and the FBI was looking for him, and all of a sudden he popped up in Adelaide in a massive syndicate here that had a Labor advisor and a former prison guard, that they're all doing it. And he's gone down as one of the worst offenders in Australia. He got 30 years prison. There was also the Queensland childcare worker that was done with, I think, 1,500 charges related to 97 children.
That was recent as well. That was within the last 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, and you think with that, they could have stopped him 5 years ago when another another educator at the childcare centre reported him. And after all came out, she got arrested. They said that she accessed material to show a reporter that this is proof that I reported, or I made a complaint against this offender. And she had the staff force, like the Raptor team, search her house and arrest this, I think she was about a 60-something-year-old Yugoslavian woman, that she blew the whistle on this guy. And I think it was Anglicare or one of the Catholic institutions that actually pushed for the prosecution, saying that she accessed private material, when all she was trying to justify to a reporter is, this is the time I reported the danger, and he kept on going to offend. Like, the police didn't investigate, they didn't take his phone, didn't look at his computer, and they would have seen thousands of images and videos of him abusing people.
The police just give me the shit sometimes. It's just, the thing with this, like, you would know better than me because you deal with these people a lot, so you would have a lot more of an insight to it. Is one of the biggest reasons of people offending that they were offended against when they were children?
No,
that's a misconception, because that's a misconception that a lot of people act. I would have thought that is why.
No, I don't know the actual statistics, but the percentages are quite low because people realise how it actually impacts them. I don't know if I've ever had an offender that
has been
that I've
offended
sued
against.
It's usually just a crime of, like, it's not like a snap crime like murder or a fight that can kick off in a matter of seconds. Like, if I've seen offenders where they have an attraction to their neighbour, and you don't just go to your neighbour's house and knock on the door and say, hey, can your kid come to mine? It's a level of grooming the parents, gaining their trust, weaseling your way into their circle, and then doing it that. So it's really a standalone crime because there's no legal justification. I had one guy once try to say, she came on to me. I've even as recently, I had an offender in New South Wales.
She came on to him. Sorry, did you just say?
7-year-old came on to a grown man.
My fucking God.
I even had a convicted offender in New South Wales who abused all 3 of his daughters. And I started suing him on behalf of my clients. And I get a phone call from his wife one day. And even though he pled guilty to offending against 2 of the children, the wife told me that her daughters are lying, and then she said to me, well, do you know what? I hope someone sexually abuses your children. And I'm like, what?
That gives me shivers down my fucking spine.
This is the kind of stuff I deal with. I get people trolling my Instagram page. I get threats every now and then. I get abusive messages. And
but from how? You should be the most liked man in Australia.
Well, that's
anyone who doesn't like you, like, maybe as a person, I don't know if they don't like you as a person outside of what you do, but to attack what you do for work is the wildest thing of all time.
And it's not a divisive subject. Like, you look at politics. Like, politics, the federal election is going to come down to the wire.
Yeah.
You've got we've had a referendum in 99 about to become a republic. We had the voice vote. We've had all this stuff that divides people. But this isn't the kind of topic that divides. And I've always said about the law changes my advocacy, the only people that would hate me would be the ones that are going to most likely hear from me.
That's very true. Well, like, if you get a phone call from Andrew Carpenter and it's not a friendly "how you going," you've made a mistake.
Yeah, and it's something that if I can be the voice of the voiceless, I actually trying to highlight this. And that's the reason why I did the videos. Like, not to simply... or just to get people to have these uncomfortable conversations. Like, you and I have both lost friends to suicide. We've both lost friends to drink driving and silly things like that. 20 years ago we never spoke about mental health. 10 years ago we didn't speak about suicide. 5 years ago we didn't speak about domestic violence or familial violence. And yet this is still such a taboo subject, even though it's happening to 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys. Like, it's about having uncomfortable conversations and to actually identify, because a lot of the people I represent, when matters go through court, I take statements from brothers, sisters, parents, and almost every time when someone discloses their parents, I speak to them. and the parents say, "Oh my God, I remember it was you were 16 years
Something
old.
clicks.
You changed overnight." Or I had one guy that abused his goddaughter, and the goddaughter thought he was the best person in the world, loved seeing him all the time, and it happened one night, and the next day she's like, "I don't want to see him anymore." And overnight the parents thought, "Something's happened. No, go see him." And they sent him interstate, so I sent her overstate to go see him. And the whole time she's calling saying, "Pick me up, I want to go home." And when it finally came out, the parents like, "Oh my God, that's why."
And do you know what? It's not also obviously that poor girl has like so much trauma. Do you know that would fuck a parent up so much to know that you were the cause of like, no, not the cause, but you helped him do it. Not helped, but you know what I mean. Like
you didn't see the warning signs.
You didn't see the signs. Like as a parent, you would have been like, "Oh my fucking God, I could have mitigated this so easily."
And that's one thing I try to do is I don't do these weekly stats to simply just get likes. I try to do it, and I start every video. If you're a parent, grandparent, auntie, and uncle, this is what you should do. You should look at signs, because there's ways to prevent this.
Listen to your kids.
Yeah, listen to your kids. Prevent them from being one-on-one behind closed doors with people you don't know. Look for change in behaviour, or one of the biggest things is look for gifts. So I've had multiple siblings where only one of them would be abused, and it would always be the one that the offender showed the most affinity towards. Get them the best birthday present, or comes over and gives them a special gift. It's the warning signs of that. And I'm not saying every godfather or family friend is doing this, but it's to be very vigilant to actually make sure that, hey, we know this is a problem. No one wants to talk about it, but how can we identify the problem before it occurs? You look at a lot of advocates out there in this space. They're actually trying to change things after the fact. But I'm trying to say, hey, I'm going to scare you into doing this so you don't do it. Or so I scare you away from doing it so you don't do it.
Also, like 10-year-olds and 7-year-olds, they don't lie. Like, when they don't want to go somewhere or do something with someone, it's because it's most likely because that person, not always touched, but like something's happened where they don't want to fucking see that person. Kids don't have that built into them yet, that lying mechanism or that fight or flight mechanism. They don't know what's going on. So like you should just listen to them. And it's one of those things that it's never going to go away, unfortunately.
It's not something you can arrest out of. If 1 in 3 men and 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys are being offended against, now imagine the impact of court. So we've got 1.6 million South Australians. So split in half, you're effectively looking at 300,000 women and 190,000 men that would experience this.
That's
and
wild.
if you think, imagine if 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys would be murdered or become meth addicts or drink drive or something like that. Imagine the crackdown.
It'd be a red alert. The state would be like COVID. They'd shut the state down.
And it's people don't realise the cost of it to the taxpayer. So back in 2016, there was a study with called Braveheart. With Bravehearts as an organisation that said back then they estimate the cost of the taxpayer is $30.1 billion a year
for
child sex abuse matters, because the government is effectively having to meet the cost of Centrelink, Medicare, rent assistance, PBS for medication. Yet the offenders, they don't meet the cost of that. It's the taxpayer that has to pay for Centrelink. It's the taxpayer that pays for Medicare, and there's a victims of crime fund in South Australia of about $300 million. Yet people that were abused before 1970, they're able to get a maximum of $2,000 for victims of crime.
How do you? So you're, for people who don't know, Andrew's also. I don't even know if we've really touched on this in other podcasts we did. You're trained in martial arts. You're very big in the MMA scene. You love MMA. You love combat sports. Did it take you a while to be able to draw the line when you're sitting across from these people and not want to fucking cave them in?
Yeah.
Like how was that process with you to really have to switch to a professional mode where you didn't just want to floor them after hearing some of these atrocities?
I've had some people try and get in my face before, and the first thing in martial arts is make sure you're a bit at a distance, and you don't want to be combative and put your hands up right away, but you can tell by someone usually in the first few seconds if they want to actually hit you and they're going to go through it. But the ones that try and get in my face and threaten me, I just simply say, you're here because of what you've done. And, you know, I'm luckily I'm a big guy. I don't get intimidated. I mean, anyone that's done MMA or trained who gets hit in the face of fun is a bit of a special person at times. But it's very controlled. And I think the big thing for me about martial arts is all about discipline. You know, I'm not going to go in and just start swinging at someone. I'm going to go, right, well, my job here is to represent my client, and half the time that means I'm protecting them, because a lot of my clients, they still think that they're that 5-year-old, that 6-year-old. Yet I had one guy that he's probably about 6'7", 6'8", and he would have been absolutely petrified to go in a room with this 5'0" priest.
That's just incredible, isn't it?
And because they still picture themselves
as a little small child.
Yeah.
Do you recall or recount a single individual? You don't have to say names. Or do you recount a certain case where you really had to look within yourself not to fucking hurt this person?
Yes, there was one guy. He abused his daughter from 2.5 until she was 16 on almost a daily basis, and I won't go into the details, but she needed a lot of surgery to help her get back to normal. And luckily he pled guilty to abusing her. He got 8 years for 14 years of
8 years
non-stop offending against her.
8 years.
And we had it was sickening. And because what happened, he abused her almost every day for her whole life, but he only admitted to 8 charges. And so instead of putting her through a trial of, you know, you see in America, like they have, you know, you're charged with 3,000 counts of something, but here they find the strongest ones, they try and convict on it. So even though he would have potentially had thousands of counts, she could not recall exact dates, times of everything that happened.
You can't when you have a fucking like everything blends in together. And
so he was one of the rare ones that actually got a criminal conviction before we sued him, and we had a trial which he didn't take part in, and so he asked to come to be heard in court after the trial. And so the judge said, all right, we'll set up a video link from prison. And so I was talking about all the horrific stuff he did to his daughter, and he's sitting there in the AVL, and the judge goes, now you want to be called on to be heard? And he's like, yep. So he heard all the horrendous stuff he did to her, and he said, oh yeah, what's going to happen with like my couch and my TV in my house? And the judge and I just looked at each other and went, you've heard what you've done to your daughter, and all you care about is what's going to happen to your couch and your TV when you're in jail, when your house gets sold. Ugh. And I was like, the level of disconnect. But I think that the one that really got me the most is the one I said before about how the wife of the offender basically said to me, I hope someone abuses your children. I've gone, all right. Okay.
That's fucking wild. That's just such a wild thing to say to someone.
And it's, you know, it's not like, you know, I hope someone, you know, punches you in the face or something. This is the wife of a convicted child sex offender who stood by him for 40 years after knowing that he's done it and making comments like this. That made my skin crawl. And, you know, things like that, you don't bring people's kids into it. I couldn't care less if I've had offenders, you know, mouth off at me and swear at me, and I'm just like, just doing my job, mate. Like, by virtue of your crime, I dislike you. I don't respect you at all, but I still am polite to them because I don't want to be seen as, you know, being that arsehole to everyone, even though they deserve it. But the second you say that about someone's kids, like, you just imagine if you're out in public and someone came up and said something to your kids, how many people would be lying before anything happened to them? Mm. So, but yeah, that one really really got me, and I'm gonna have great fun when I take that guy's house and give it between his daughters.
Is it almost so? It would also be beating the shit out of someone's very like temporary. Taking their belongings from them and giving them to the abused would be so much more satisfying as well.
My big thing is that victim survivors, they feel scared, small, alone,
so
vulnerable.
It's like being there for them and being the knight in shining armor almost.
And so there's nothing more vulnerable than someone stripping you of all of your assets. And, you know, if I can make them, like, I wouldn't go out of my way to make them feel like that, because I've got to have a certain level of professionalism. But deep down, if I can remove them of all their assets and make them go, oh, I won't have anywhere to live. I won't, have money to buy food. It's like, well, what do you think's been happening to your victim survivor for the past 20, 30, 40 years?
We don't have a public registry system in Australia, do we?
No, I myself and Madeline West, we actually pushed for it, and the South Australian Liberal government has actually tabled it. So one of the big things is, you look in this day and age, there's blended families where people get divorced, they have young children, they go and have a relationship with another person that has children as well. Should be no rhyme or reason that they can't go to a police station and say, hey, before my new partner moves in, can I just do a check on them? And the American system, it's not like, I'm going to check, if Bob Smith next door is a convicted sex offender. It'll say, you have
X amount in your area.
In your area, or within a mile, 2 mile radius. So if you've got...
That's good enough.
Yeah.
Before you move into an area, like if you're spending $600,000 on a house, you should know how many sex offenders are in the area.
And the big argument against it is it's going to promote vigilante behaviour. And in 13 years of law, I've only ever seen one matter where an offender has actually been harmed, and that was, he was leaving court and the mother of one of his victims was punching him in the back whilst he's walking. And if you're worried about vigilante behaviour, you think the parents of a child would be the first one that would track you down and harm you. Now, how many assaults or murders do we hear about in South Australia that happen to? It doesn't. So
even worldwide, it's very minuscule, the amount of people that have exacted revenge upon people like that. I believe. Yeah. I would imagine it's very. Life's not a movie.
There was one in Russia a while ago. It was a man abused his best friend's child, and the dad went and stabbed him 40 times, and then he died, and he went to court, and the judge in Russia read it and said, oh, all right, after reading the evidence, I think this man died by 40 self-inflicted stab wounds, and let the father go.
See, I don't know if you can say it, but to me that sounds like justice.
Yeah, and it's not, if it's an eye for an eye, the whole world will be blind. But
yeah.
When it comes to that, like, that's one of the few times I've actually heard about a vigilante act. But my big thing is, you see all this legislation after the fact. I want to prevent it from occurring. If you throw everything in there about you will be on a sex offender registry, you will lose your super. I think the state government has actually tried or in the process of passing legislation to prevent convicted sex offenders from working at places frequented by children. So fast food restaurants, subways, arcades, things like that, which is great. But the problem is you have to get a conviction first, and they are so difficult to get unless people come forward on the spot. You look at even like adult rape, for instance, you're 97% likely to walk free from a rape conviction. Sorry,
is that real? It's 97%.
And it's very rare that people get done on that, because they can say, well, it's not like a child where a child cannot consent. With rape, it's, consent was withdrawn halfway through. Some wasn't capable of consent, and even the new stealthing laws, where if someone removes a condom during the act, if it's not by consent, it's technically rape.
There's so many sub definitions of it.
Yeah, but it's an adult can consent to something from happening, they can withdraw it partway through, but a child can never consent with sexual act. And the age of consent in South Australia is 16, but it's 18 if you're in a fiduciary relationship. So if you, say, work at McDonald's and you're 16 and your boss is, you have a relationship with your boss, by virtue of that employer-employee relationship, you have to be older than 16.
You have to be 18.
Yeah.
But so what? In what case is it legal to sleep with a 16-year-old? So
the age of consent is 16. So if you got a boyfriend and girlfriend at 16, 17, then that's perfectly legal.
Okay.
But you're seeing a lot of people tiptoe the line with exploitation material, because if a 16-year-old sends a naked image to a 16-year-old boyfriend, if the police ever got a hold of that boyfriend's number, he's still in possession of child exploitation material. Yes. So it's a fine line, but the one thing that I've seen recently is, ever since child abuse has come to the forefront and people know about it, a lot of people are disclosing when they first do sex education. I think it's year 4 or 5 in primary school they start learning that. A lot of people have gone, oh, hang on, that happened to me, that's not right. And then they come forward, where 20, 30 years ago it was, I didn't know what that is, or the principal told me not to say anything, or mum said, you don't tell anyone about your dad because he's a breadwinner, because back in the 80s and 90s it was very common to have a one income household.
I wonder if AI and shit's also contributing to a lot of this, because you can make up some fucking crazy images, and and I'm sure there's versions where there's not like limitations on what you can actually make. Like I use AI to make all my thumbnails, and it's discernible from fucking reality sometimes.
Yeah, well, a lot of offenders are actually using pictures of, say, friends' children they find on Facebook, and all of a sudden they put that into
augmenting
AI,
them.
and do it in that. And the law hasn't caught up to technology yet, and that's one thing you like to see.
It's a massive grey area, that would be.
Exactly, and I was great friends with Russell Manser, and he always said that offenders who are in possession of material should be charged with possession after the fact, because it's, one image of a child could be shared hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times.
Do you know what was crazy? I've never been to Southeast Asia. I imagine Southeast Asia is a very big hub for people that want to teeter on the line of like trying it out, because they look very underage.
Yes.
But when I went to Japan, very similar. The women there are very, very small, petite, like very prepubescent looking women. Yeah. A majority of them. They're a very small country. And all I could think of, how the fuck can a 35-year-old man come here and even look at even the 20-year-old girls there into a Western standard would look fairly underage.
So Australia's the third highest consumer in the world, not per capita, highest consumer in the world of child exploitation material from Southeast Asia. America's number 1, the UK's number 2, we're number 3. Now
we got not even a 16th of the population.
No, I think America's about 300 million, the UK is about maybe 80 or 90 million.
We're 24.
26.
Yeah.
And so there's 500,000 live streams a day coming from Southeast Asia. And what was happening during COVID was the offenders couldn't go on their annual sex holidays, so they would be finding someone in a community, they'd be paying them over some encrypted video streaming service and saying, I'll pay you, and they would talk them through exactly what to do. And because they're not recording it, because it was encrypted, they'd pay for it and it'd be gone. And if you can trace someone that's constantly putting money over to a shell company in Southeast Asia, or constantly using PayPal to pay someone over there.
You got him.
It's just sick that these guys are doing this and they're not getting caught, and it's that prevalent.
There's a fantastic I can't remember his name. He does like little mini docos on YouTube of crazy like murder cases or heaps prolific pedophiles, and there was this one in the late 90s or early 2000s called Mr. Swirly. And he was American, but he was obviously sex touring in Southeast Asia, and he used to take videos and put them on the dark web of him with all of these underage women. But he would mock the police. He would put photos of himself up, but he would use a filter and swirl his face around. And he did it all for years, like 8 years. They could not catch him. And then one agent one day was like, why don't we just unswirl his face? Like, why don't we just revert the filter? Yeah. And they did, and they found him. But he was like hundreds of counts of molestation and abuse.
Well, it's, Russell always made a good point, and he would always say that the government's more interested in preventing 2 bikies from having a beer at a pub than they are of having 100 pedophiles at a Wiggles concert.
Mm-hmm.
And, you think, you see courts of bikies, there was one a while ago, 2 were in a chicken shop together. One of them was waiting inside. I think the other one saw him and went in to say hello, and they got charged with being in a place together. And you think, do
you know what? Australian crime, actually at the moment it's starting to ramp up and be a bit crazy in Australia. But Melbourne. But traditionally, Australian crime compared to other countries, it's pretty civil. They keep it, there's no crossfire usually. It's not like South America where they're going to unload a whole AK-47 into a coffee shop and kill 7 children. But like they're so focused, like you said, on just these minute things that they're missing the big picture of all of these other crimes. But Melbourne, in all seriousness, is a bit of a crazy place today. I just mentioned off camera, this might air in a week or 2, but Sam Abdul Rahim got, who, for people who don't know, I don't know exactly what he is, but he was a part of a crime family, and there's a tobacco war at the moment going on in Melbourne. He was just executed.
Alleged crime family.
He was executed in broad fucking daylight at an apartment block. Crazy.
And you look at when that happens, that night on the news, you've got neighbours having ring cameras showing a car speed off, you've got ATM vision that's already into the media, and it's so quick for officers to catch something like that, which Yeah, we see how many brazen murders a year? Probably less than 50.
I'd say max 50.
And if you're seeing the area that I do, you're seeing potentially thousands of South Australian kids every single day this is happening to. And I mean, it's a resource problem, but it's also the fact that you've got to hire a lot of police officers that would sit down and have to go through, like Jad Brooker we spoke about before. They had 1 million images for officers to go through and lay charges, and you think
how do you even get, like, what are you going to do with 1 million?
But you think, that they use them as currency, they trade them. But you think getting one officer to go through all those images, it would...
He'd need fucking therapy after it.
It's bad. Like, luckily, I've never had to review anything like that. I'm in the civil side, so I'm not involved in the prosecution. If someone comes to me and says, this person offended me, I say, right, let's sue. But it's very rare that a person... Like, there was a chiropractor called Snodgrass that he was recording... He was a chiropractor. He was recording all girls and women that went to him. He would force them all to have x-rays before he treated them. And he set up a little pinhole camera in his little x-ray room. And he would then save each person under a separate file and always add pictures to it. And so he got done... I think there was massaging someone one day and they saw a pin camera. But the police had to then go through and look at all his books and then go knock on the doors of these young girls' parents and said, hey, sit down, we've got photos of your child undressing in a room. And you think, well, he's obviously done this, and why you have to reverse engineer all this to try and trace the people. But the ones that are doing it in Southeast Asia, it's, firstly, how do they get the contact details over there, and why aren't their computers being monitored?
It's just one of those things. It's just never going to go away. But you need just... The thing that... I don't know. They obviously understand. They just turn a blind eye to it. Do you know how much crime you could mitigate by trying to attack child abuse? Because I imagine what stems from child abuse is a lot of drugs for a lot of people, a lot of alcohol, and a lot of crime. Like, it fucks you up as a person. Yeah. Mitigating this would mitigate so many other crimes.
It would. And I never knew this until a few years ago, but the reason why sex offenders and child abusers are hated most in prison is because most of the people in prison...
Most of the criminals... I don't want to speak on the behalf of the prison system, but a lot of them have suffered child abuse.
And the most common thing is that when it happens to someone at a young age... they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, and then you can't be $1,000 a day heroin addict unemployed. So you've got to then start looking at, you start going to break into cars and break into houses, then robbing banks. It's something that it just explodes. And most people that come forward to me say the same thing. I turn to drugs. There's a place called McGill Training Centre here in Adelaide that closed down about 2012, and it was a jail for boys. And what happened with that is, for about 30 years, any boy that went in there was sexually abused. So they would abuse them when they did the initial search. The cells didn't have bathrooms in there, so if they wanted to go to the bathroom at night, they had to push an intercom, and the guards would come and pull them out. But all these guards that went there or worked there, they would go under code names, and it was just an ongoing syndicate of abuse there. And there's about 180 matters currently before the court of McGill Training Centre, and everyone's coming forward now, and it's at to the point where the police have actually set up a task force to investigate this. And it's safe to say that when a government says you need to shut down a centre, there's something wrong. It wasn't the government that shut down McGill. A representative from the United Nations flew to Adelaide in 2009 after hearing complaints about this centre, walked in there, looked around and said to the Labor government, you need to shut this place down now because it breaches human rights. And that was a centre where young boys were housed.
Jesus Christ.
And so that was the place where if a child was arrested on a weekend and they obviously refused bail, they couldn't stay in a police station, get transferred to McGill, abused by staff members there.
Isn't there a lawsuit, like a class action style lawsuit, going on at Adelaide High now too?
I haven't heard of one at Adelaide High. I know there was a teacher from Adelaide High that got found guilty back in maybe 2015.
There's a big case at the moment. It escapes me, but I will message you. There's a couple schools at the moment. I believe one was Adelaide High. It was one of those city kind of Western-based schools.
Yeah, I'm doing the ones against Blackfriars and St Ignatius.
And there's a lot of students that are coming through, and they're offering out severance or like packages, like money.
Yeah. So what's happening now is a lot of the institutions or the schools that are known to abusing people, they're trying to say, hey, instead of suing us, go through the redress scheme. In other words, don't take our money, take the taxpayers' money. And the redress scheme was set up on the heels of the Royal Commission to do a more streamlined approach to people getting compensation by saying that you won't have to go to court, you'll get a quick result. But then they didn't expect that many people to come forward. And now it's actually a lot quicker in certain circumstances to actually sue institution and win before someone would actually get a payment through the redress scheme. So these big schools that are worth millions of dollars are trying to convince people to go and go through a taxpayer paid scheme, but don't touch us. So it's sickening, and it's the same schools you're hearing over and over again that are doing this, and it's just going back to the days where you don't say anything to, don't tell anyone, don't. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. I had one guy that disclosed to a principal at a well-known school that he was being abused by the teacher, and the principal put him in detention for a month. He said, well, you're obviously lying, yet it was rife at the school by that teacher.
It's so weird. And then they give you like this package of or this payout of $100,000. It's like, okay, that's what my whole childhood was worth. $100,000 fucking dollars. Well,
that's the cap for the redress applications, where if you sue an institution, you get a court to reward you what the damage is. And it's hard because if you're abused as a child, it's very hard. It's not like a motor vehicle accident where if you're working as a doctor and you get involved in a motor vehicle accident at 50, you're paralysed, you can't work to 67. A court would say, right, well, your average wage until you're 50 is X. You can't work for another 17 years. That's your future loss. Where a lot of with child abuse is anecdotal evidence. What did your parents do? What do your siblings do? And I've had people that their parents are accountants, their brothers are accountants, and they don't work. And you say, well, your career trajectory would most likely be in the accounting sphere. So, but then if an offender is a person that just has a house, you can't then be like, well, my losses are $1 million, pay me that. If the guy only has a $200,000 or $300,000 house, that's all you can claim. But where the taxpayer is footing the bill for the redress scheme, they're footing the bill for all the damage that people suffer abuse in institutions, and yet you see all these churches worth billions and billions of dollars, and they're effectively rubbing their hands at the recent High Court decision. And I did a current affairs story on it, and I said that this is the biggest win that churches have had since they become exempt from paying taxes in Australia.
Does this take up do you do any other form of cases anymore?
Yeah, I do.
Or does this take up most of your time now?
I'd say I'm probably about 60-70% abuse law. I do a lot of defamation, a lot of fraud. I do a ton of police matters where
that'd be like light work for you after.
Yeah. It's I do a lot of police matters and where I'm suing officers who assault people, and that's I'm not saying all police officers are bad, but if you've got a guy that's there handcuffed on camera and you've got a cop walk over and king hit him and stomp on the ground and break his jaw in a few places and knock his teeth out, and the cop says it never happened, well,
I went to court with the cops and I won.
Yeah.
I won. They were so rude to me.
Yeah.
I was 19 and I was at, do you remember Marble Bar?
I remember.
On Weymouth Street?
Yep.
I was on
My friend owned that for years.
Yes, I was on Weymouth Street, and I was really friendly with all the bartenders and all of the staff and the security there, because it was the same security guards as the Vic. And I used to go there every Thursday, and I literally left work, hadn't had a drink yet. I drove there, and I got 10 vodka sodas because I knew all my friends would, I had a group of 10 people. We all met each other there every Thursday.
Two for one Thursdays?
2 for 1 Thursdays. rock, paper, scissors. And bought the drinks. Hadn't even had time to turn around. Sniffer dogs came in, had nothing on me whatsoever. Yeah. Sniffer dogs came and sniffed me and walked away. And then it came straight back to me, and it jumped on me as if it wanted to play. Sniffer dogs are not meant to do that. Yeah. It jumped on me like a dog, and it started when they find something, they sit.
Yeah.
So this dog wanted to play, and it was a big fucking German Shepherd. So I've grabbed it and I kind of pushed it off me really gently. As soon as I did that, I felt this hand above my head, grabbed my hair and just smashed my nose on the bar. I've turned around and I'm like, what the fuck? I've like thrown a hand and accidentally slapped one of them, and I'm like, that's a fucking police officer. And then they've taken me outside and they're like, you're a dog basher, we're going to beat the fuck out of you in the watch house, you little cunt, rah, 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 just yelling at me. And I was dead sober. I was like, you've made a fucking very big mistake tonight, because I'm so coherent right now. And I ended up taking 2 years, but I got a formal apology from all of them.
Yeah.
I'm at the judge made every single one of the officers write me a personal apology.
And it's not, I do a lot of matters where I get some people, an officer arrested me and, bent my arm back, and it's like, well, they can use reasonable force. But the ones that I do are where, someone needed facial reconstructive surgery and the police officer said we never touched him.
Idiots.
It's like, what are you guys doing? And this is, again, like...
And I'm not shitting on police officers, because generally, I've actually, besides that, I have been so blessed to have had such good... Even when I was in the wrong, I've always had great experiences with police officers.
Oh, same here. Like, a lot of my good mates are police officers, and my big thing is if you spit at a cop, if you hit a cop, if you do anything like that,
you're fucked.
That's that's a court's not going to look at that. But it's I had a guy that was just walking down the street once, and he got king hit by an officer, and the officer said that he had him in a headlock, but the officer had him in a rear naked choke with both hooks in, and I'm like,
you're controlling him.
I'm like, if you're in a rear naked choke with both hooks in, you cannot put someone in a headlock. It's completely impossible.
Yeah.
And so,
you're on the wrong end.
Yeah, do a lot of defamation, do a lot of financial fraud, which is always fun, where it's,
I was going to say, that'd be more like light-hearted work for you, really, wouldn't it?
But it's like the lengths people go to defraud people, it's insane. And, you've got people that pretend to be builders that they're not, pretend to be bankers that they're not, pretend to be accountants that they're not. And, if you're giving over someone hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's...
Do you see a lot of it with building now? Because building would be a massive one.
Yeah, there's a lot of unlicensed builders out there that do work, and they simply just take the money and run. But it's mainly just like investors, if it's crypto or the typical pyramid schemes where.
Did you have to learn a bit about crypto because of how much that would have become a major factor in fraud now?
I had one crypto matter about 4 or 5 years ago, and actually looked into it, and some guys from Adelaide created their own crypto syndicate, and basically looking at it, I said, right, so these guys said, we've got 1,000 of these that are worth $50 each, and we'll sell them on. And so it's like, you and I could basically have our own little crypto now and sell it to people, but it's there's no such thing as a get rich quick scheme. Like, I had some guy probably 10 plus years ago, just called up one day and said, oh, can I just get a certified driver's license? I'm like, okay, come in, and certified driver's license, just made small talk and said, oh, what are you getting it for? And he's like, oh, I've won this massive lotto. I'm like,
oh no.
Okay, like what lotto? Oh, it's a mobile phone lotto. I'm like, okay. And he goes, oh, so I need to give him my tax phone number, my driver's license. And I said, look, this is a scam. He's like, no. I said, all right, did you enter a mobile phone lottery? No. You've got a random person with probably a Eastern European phone number messaging you saying you've won like $100 million. And they want your tax phone number and your driver's license and your bank details. But you're seeing a lot of people, especially vulnerable. I was at a police station a while ago, and the old lady in front of me, she got ripped off by what she thought was Telstra, and she had to pay $400 in iTunes gift vouchers.
Those people are fucked. So I watch this YouTube channel. There's these group of hackers that they mainly focus on Indian call center scams.
And they hack their cameras. And
they put on voice changes and pretend they're elderly, but then they'll just fuck with them and just destroy. It's very funny to watch. Those kind of people to me are also just scum of the earth. Yeah,
there's a guy, I think his name's Daniel May, for instance. He every Christmas he releases a new video where he gets an Amazon delivery onto his porch, and I think it's up to that maybe the 8th year. And he's developed inside it's a fart machine.
Mark Rober.
And it's got glitter, fart machine, sirens,
hilarious.
drone, and just watching these people, and they get so offended when they get caught. But it's it's the whole porch pirate thing. It's I think that's the lowest of the low. Like, anyone that rips off someone and takes food off their family's tables, it's you can't get lower than sex offenders. But again, look at say murder, for instance. Like, there's times where murder was intended. Self-defense of one, self-defense another.
And there's some situations where you can see how it accidentally happens.
Yeah,
like a crime of, what do you call it? Crime of
passion. Or beaten wife syndrome, where wives who have endured horrendous domestic abuse for years, they just snap and assault someone. But again, that's not like, I had one fraudster in Adelaide. He convinced people that he owned multiple New York real estate properties, and he's a billionaire. And I'm like, you're not a billionaire, you live in Hackham. Like, but he convinced people. He had the gift of the gab, and he has pillaged millions of dollars from people.
There is a massive skill in con artistry.
But the thing is, it's the fact that they keep doing it, and then you have. I think most fraudsters, when they're sentenced, they usually get a psych report to mitigate sentencing, and they're actually saying they've got narcissistic personality disorder, where they believe they've done nothing wrong, believe they're in the right. But yeah, it's common. You see everyone now. Everyone knows a dodgy friend of a friend that's always like, I've got this new venture, or invest in this.
Try and look for the maximum return with minimal effort.
Exactly. There's no such thing. If you go somewhere and you look at Tim Nackey on Instagram, for instance, like he's the blackjack guy every day. He puts money down. Like, I watch him every day.
I love that guy.
But you think every week, you're like, oh God, mate. Like, you're putting, I think at one stage you're putting $100 grand down a pop, and you think it's not that easy. I'm in a fantasy football league, and all the guys I play with, they gamble on every
There's
sport
big
there
money
is.
in fantasy football, isn't there?
Well, we just normally do it with punishments. There was one in America. There was the loser of the fantasy football league had to try to be the 1000th man in the Bonnie Blue thing.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But I tell everyone, like with gambling, I said, I've been to Vegas, and the biggest buildings in Vegas are the casinos. You don't see everyone driving around Rolls Royce. If gambling was that easy, everyone would be doing it. But it's easy come, easy go, and especially with cost of living, anyone's looking at a way to try and make extra information or make extra money. But they're the people, unfortunately, that they're the prime targets. Is you're seeing people going through divorce and get a large windfall, people receiving inheritance. If anyone finds that someone's got a bunch of money, Chinese whispers will get to the wrong person. They'll convince them they've got the new property investment scheme or crypto scheme or share trading, things like that. It's there's people need to realise that there's such thing as it's too good to be true. And if you're thinking about investing with people, speak to a lawyer, speak to an accountant, speak to a financial planner. Especially
with gambling. So you touched on it before, like Tim Nackey. I actually know. So the company, the gambling site that he bets on, is based in Australia. It's based in South Australia, I believe. Well, with their headquarters, and the owner is based in Australia.
Yeah.
I know someone who works there. He's a friend of mine. And he was explaining that, so all of these professional gamblers that you see online at the moment, when they're betting $500 pokey hits and $200,000 hands, they have deals with the casino of percentage loss. So even though he's betting 100, if he loses that 100, he's getting 60 back, and he's also getting paid by the company to bet there. So it's almost a victimless crime. He's still gambling a lot of fucking money, and he has a big risk, but it's not as big as you'd think. Because I love watching gambling because I love gambling. Yeah. I love one of my biggest vices is I love the casino. Like, I just love everything about the casino. I love having a beer at the blackjack table, and it's just so I love watching a lot of gambling. And I was like, how are these people affording all of a sudden?
Oh, it's insane. You see people on roulette table literally putting $400 or $500 down on a roll. Like my fantasy football league, we each chuck $10 a week on, and we just do a multi at the end of the week. And all week we just love this game.
By fantasy football, you're saying NFL, yeah? That's your sport.
Yeah, NFL, and all week for $10 each. We're talking all week of messing back and forward, and
it's more the shit talking, and it's the bragging rights
and the punishments, and
so
all that.
Fun.
There was one in America where the loser of the fantasy football league had to spend 24 hours in the pancake kitchen over there, but everyone who's in the league had to do 2-hour shifts with him, and then you lose an hour every stack of pancakes you ate.
That's hilarious.
So we were thinking of having actually a combine for the draft order in fantasy football league.
That would be funny.
The 40-yard dash and bench pressing and things like that. But I mean, any fantasy sport like that, like you spoke about vices before. Like if you've got anything like that you're not harming anyone. I've got friends who collect comic books, or whatever they do. Everyone's got their own vice to do, and unless you're hurting anyone, then live your life.
The NFL Combine. So I don't watch NFL. I watched last year's Super Bowl, but I love watching the Combine every year just to see. Like, I don't actually think there are better athletes, athletic wise, than an NFL player.
You look at Jared Hayne when he went over there. He's a big, muscular rugby guy, but you had the third string running backs of the San Francisco 49ers. They look twice his size.
And they run faster. They jump higher. They're just... I believe I read somewhere that the NFL player has an average, unless you're a quarterback, or a kicker, like an average professional career of like 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, because it's the risk of concussions are high.
Just the body strain.
And there's an ESPN documentary years ago called Broke, where it's 75% of all professional athletes will be bankrupt in the first 3 years of retiring.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And like,
you're giving these... I don't know. They probably do a lot more media and finance training now with them.
Well, yeah. To play professional football in America, you have to go to college first. And to play college football, you have to get a certain grade point percentage. Now, obviously, the bigger successful schools will probably fudge the grades of the star athletes that go there. But you're getting 21-year-olds that are thrust into professional or American professional football. Millions of dollars. And they've got finance degrees or... business majors where you've got a lot of 18-year-old AFL players here that literally are fresh out of school. Like, you imagine if you and I were 18 all of a sudden again. Like, imagine being 18 years old,
getting $10 million in your bank account.
I was working 1 day a week at Footy Park, earning $120 a week through uni. It was literally $10 to my car, half a carton of Carlton Colds with my mate, and door entry at the Sandbar every Friday night.
I was getting $300 a week at my first job, 65 hours a week, and I stretched that into 5 days. 5 days of partying.
Probably straight without sleep.
Yeah. Do you have a... So you're an NFL fan. Is the Super Bowl in 2 weeks?
Yep.
So are they playing to get into the Super Bowl?
It's already been announced. It's unfortunate. I'm a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan, so there's no other team I hate more than the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have seemed to have taken over the bandwagon fans from when Tom Brady retired.
Did the Chiefs win last year?
Yeah, they've won the last 2 years.
They're the one with the red colours. Interesting. So who's the favourite?
I think the Chiefs are, but I mean Philly have an amazing running game where Chiefs have a great defense. So it's going to be a flip of the coin.
Have you ever been to a game?
Yep, been to. I went to see the Cowboys play the Giants in Jersey in 2019. I saw.
What's the atmosphere like compared to like an AFL game?
Amazing. So the Cowboys Stadium, it's $1 billion stadium. The TV screen in there, it's 30 metres high by 70 metres long.
Jesus Christ.
And so the playoff game at Cowboys Stadium, they sent everyone a thing out saying, everyone who's got tickets to the game, wear white. And so the whole stadium was a sea of white jerseys. And then next to the stadium, you've got the baseball field in Arlington, Texas. And next to that, you've got a thing called Texas Live, which is the size of probably half a Bunnings, which is a sports bar. And they've got one room that's a country theme, one that's a sports theme. There's beer pong tables. There's everything and especially I spent 2 summers at college over there, and the college life in America is...
You went to college in America?
My best mate got a scholarship over there, and so I every summer after uni, I never would go out during the year. I literally worked 5 jobs through uni to go, and at the end of every year go and spend a month with him in America. And so over at colleges over there, like I was in Jacksonville State, Alabama. And
that would have been a massive NFL state.
Yeah, massive football state. But everyone over there at the college wore Jacksonville State T-shirts, where you just imagine if you go to university here, it would be so out of place here for everyone wearing the school colours. And that's why you look at, it's so great with Australian MMA fighters, because they're literally going and competing with guys that have been wrestling since they were 5 years old, that are basically wrestling through college. And look at Brazilians, BJJ for years, or South Koreans, Taekwondo.
It is actually fucking really incredible how well the Oceania does. Like Australia and New Zealand, it's insane how well we do. When you factor in how much more of an upper hand the rest of the world has to us.
And I think a lot of it is a lot of the Australian guys train very smart. Like, you rarely see guys like Volkanovski go for hell for living sparring.
No, it's all very... And now... You got the crossover with Robert Whittaker and stuff all going to CKB. They're all over in New Zealand now. They're like, why the fuck aren't we all training together?
So Brando Pericic is a guy from Adelaide.
Yes, he's over in...
he's there, and I remember...
Caruso's there now too.
Yeah, Caruso was in Miami for a while, I think. But
yes, and now he's over at CKB with
but look how many
Brando.
look how many guys are kind of there. Hookers out of there. Pedro was there. Volk goes there. Israel goes there. There's another light heavyweight that just got signed to the UFC that's over there now. And you look at the hotbed of Auckland talent going through there, and look at the Australian talent going there.
It's great. And even the local leagues like Eternal and Hex, and there's incredible
DFC
local talents. DFC, you got the...
so I've been doing DFC for 8 years now. I did Demolition in Melbourne for...
They're gone. That's done now,
yeah,
yes.
So that was such a great promotion, great the Carl family there, and it got to the point where like they all work full time. It got to the point where this was. They always said once they stop enjoying it, it felt like a business. They want to stop, and it's very rare that you see a martial arts or any sport promotion go out on top. Like they were selling out shows, and they just got to the point where it's either we grow or we just dedicate our full time life to it. But they've got Holly and Mia, their daughters, they're twin 17-year-olds, and it's a rough gig to put on shows like that.
There's no money in it. Like it's hard.
It's a passion, and if you don't enjoy it, but
it's a labour of love.
But the great thing of that, like doing DFC here, I've been commentating that for years, and you're putting on amateur fighters in a world class arena. Like it's like having in America. Imagine an amateur show in Madison Square Garden. Like there's probably 2 or 3 meccas and sporting ovals in Australia. It's the MCG, it's the SCG, and even all the cricketers that play in Adelaide, they always say Adelaide.
Shit's all over them. In my opinion, Adelaide Oval is fucking the best stadium in Australia. It's just the walk over the bridge.
Like a lot of stadiums go up. So NFL stadiums go completely up where it's open. And you look at Adelaide Oval, like
the McGarry Room's so good for fights too.
Yeah.
When you open up those, when I went there last time, and you were like, no, those curtains are going to be open. You're going to see the whole backdrop of the CBD.
Yeah, it's a riverbank.
It's so cool.
And it's especially like the shows in daylight saving where it's still light out there. But they had a few years ago, they had a show when the Fringe was on, and they had all the riverbank, like when it was Royal Croquet Club along Pinky Flat. When they opened the blinds, you had a light show, you had the river was purple, you had but that's like there's a lot of promotions at the moment putting on amazing shows, and you look at some of the young fighters on DFC, they're 18, 19 years old having 2 or 3 amateur fights, and I'm calling these fights thinking these guys look like pros.
The skill level has gone up immensely for amateur fighters.
Well, because back in the MMA Down Under days, back in 2012, 13, 14, you've had maybe 1 or 2 fight gyms. You had one cage that was down on...
I used to love MMA Down Under.
Yeah, on Northeast Road. It was Planet Max's old cage. It was maybe 2.5 by 2.5. And then when I started doing it, we had a guy called Richard Blake actually built a cage in his garage. And it was a single garage, and literally you do a few rounds, you go out in the grass, and there'd be dog turds on the ground, and there would be like bolts hanging out of the cage. But it was, and everyone thought it was so taboo. But look at all the gyms now. There's there's a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms opening up that solely focus on grappling, and then there's a lot of great MMA gyms that focus on it all. But it's all just young, normal guys. You're not getting the thugs going there.
And gyms get along these days. Like
exactly.
There's a lot of in the jiu-jitsu community, it's a bit different. I imagine I know for a fact there's still some certain jiu-jitsu gyms in Adelaide that don't like their students going and cross-training, and they're a bit more like old school traditional BJJ styles. But in the MMA scene, like Cardio Flex, fucking Red Star, M16, CCMA, Trinity, like all of these really big power clubs in Adelaide, they don't give a fuck if you go train at another club.
I remember back MMA Down Under days, I think there was only one black belt back in that years ago, and now you've got
probably Leo Aruda was probably the only black belt in Adelaide at one point.
And then I think the next was Dave DeConte.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got Mike Turner Miles got his black belt recently.
Adam Jones has entered the scene.
All of these people where it's now Adelaide. You're seeing, we haven't really seen any Adelaide guys on the UFC scene. Like Brando should be on a UFC show. Like,
I think give him like if he has like 1 or 2 impressive wins, with his camp that he's with, I'd be surprised if he doesn't at least make an appearance on an Australian
He had 2
card.
fights in 7 days last year, and he knocked out the first guy in 17 seconds.
The second one was loss, wasn't it?
No, the second one he won in about a minute.
Oh, really?
And then he broke his thumb badly over Christmas, so he'll be back. And he's another one where he sat in the crowd with me. I think the show before I started commenting at DFC, he sat in the crowd and we were just talking. He's like, I want to do that. And then he started Trinity a week later, and
big boy. And
like he was like Mike Turner as a 130 kilo black belt, and Brando's first week in Trinity, he was
having good rounds.
There's certain people that are put on this earth to do something, and you take one look at Brando, the way he moves, the way he conducts himself, and you're like, that guy's got world champion written all over him.
It's even Declan Moody. Declan Moody representing South Australia at 80cc last year.
And I remember the mild-mannered little 18-year-old that came here that was skinny and had no tattoos, and look at him now.
Bro, he's a man. He spent one summer over at Texas at B team, and he came back a man.
We look at like the CCMA boys. Like
Alan's a sweetheart, man.
When Alan was up in
Whyalla.
Yeah, in Whyalla. There was one guy, this fight, he would work at the mines. He'd literally drive an hour and a half to get to training, train, go back, work his 12-hour days. And you've got gyms like that where, like Barossa at the moment, you've got guys...
Barossa's doing well, man.
And like people all over the wine region here that are travelling hours. I remember when Joe Brown at Cardioflex, he moved down your way and he was driving all the way down to Cardioflex a few nights a week to train.
Yeah, it's a small community in Adelaide. We might be a little bit behind on some certain things, but it's a really good future we have here. A lot of young fighters. You just got to let them fight. Like, they just got to... It's a shame that we don't have enough fighters to have more frequent shows.
I think the big thing is that because the gyms are kind of cross-populating with each other, it's hard because you've got only a certain amount of lightweights.
A certain amount of matchups.
They're all training partners with each other, and that's why DFC is growing great. You've got guys on the card 18, 19, 20, along with the guys that have had 3, 4, 5 fights.
Have they ever done interstate DFC?
No.
They've never tried? Or hinted at the idea of it?
Not that I know of.
Probably no reason to, really, is there?
Well, you've cornered the South Australian market, and you've got... I mean, there's no other...
There's nothing like DFC in Adelaide.
Yeah, you can't... You have... I think Eternal came here and went to the old Clipsal Powerhouse, or...
Eternal... The last Eternal... I don't know if it was the last Eternal, but the second to last Eternal was at Titanium Arena.
That's it.
Miles Simpson fought on it. That was his last fight. The actual last one was at HQ when they tried to move HQ onto Hindley Street, I believe. It's a shame they don't come back here. I talked to the promoters of Hex, and I was like, because I talked to them a fair bit, and I was like, you would be silly not to fucking come to Adelaide, man. There's a massive hole in the market for a big show to come here, and just once a year, just come once a year and just do a show in Adelaide.
Yeah.
Adelaide does it. We watch fights. We like watching fights. I watch 2 fucking seagulls fight over a chip. Like, I just love watching fights.
It's I mean, we don't have the population. Like, you look at the Melbourne shows where they have literally 20 or 30 fight gyms, and you can actually have the talent to put that on. And people come, like Hex coming here, you've seen a few other shows come here, and the numbers aren't great.
There's another promotion. I'm trying to think. Is it Bully something? Or...
There was Bully Beatdown. There was also...
what was it? There's an ex-UFC fighter. He had a couple fights in the UFC.
Not Ebersol, is it?
No, not Ebersol. And Miles was supposed to roll him at Grappling Industries. Oh, my goodness.
Dan Kelly.
No. Oh, my goodness. It'll come back to me, but he's got a promotion now, and apparently it's fantastic.
I know Duke Diddy is starting one in Canberra. There's Storm Damage in Canberra. There's, is it Fusion?
There's a Fusion as well.
Yeah.
The more fight promotions, the better. Like, as long as amateurs have a proving ground to get some experience before they do go to some of these bigger shows, because now there's a legitimate avenue now set for MMA fighters of how to get into the UFC.
Yeah.
You go to your local shows, you go to your DFCs. So you go to your local shows, then you go to a bigger show, which I reckon DFC would be the next step up from a smaller show. And then once you dominate that promotion, then you get a call up from Eternal. And then once you're in Eternal, if you do well there, you're going to get a phone call from Dana or from whoever and go to Contender Series. Like, there is some sort of beaten path to get to a big promotion now.
Well, Jonathan McAuliffe, I've re-announced and commentated a few of his shows in Melbourne. He just started doing amateur shows in Demolition. He won his fight on Dana White's Contender Series, and he's fighting in Sydney next month. And
it's like Cody Haddon had to pull out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah?
He had to pull out. He got injured. He was supposed to fight in Sydney, but then that Thicknessy, Cody, is it Cody Haddon? Colby Thickness, I don't know how to say his last name. I believe it's Thickness or Thicknessy. He's stepping in from him. He's another Eternal fighter, I believe, or Hex. I think he's an Eternal or Hex fighter.
It's hard. A lot of the big names don't want to come to Australia to fight because of the tax we have here.
And people think it's the travel time. See, I didn't know this. It's actually our tax laws.
Yeah.
Because the Australian government fucking taxes them, and then they go back to America or wherever, and then they get fucked again. So if you're earning $1 million, you're taking home 250 grand Australian. So you're really only going over for 150 grand.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like, you see a lot of the guys first timers, $8,000 a fight, and people. I spoke to someone at work the other day, and I said, "How much do you think these amateur or the first fights in the UFC get?" And they're like, "Oh, hundreds." I'm like, no, it's
10 grand.
Yeah, it's 8 and 8 to show, and then
8 and 8, and then if you fucking somehow perform well, you get that 50 grand. But that 50 grand's a lot harder to get than people think. Like, it's not easy going through a fucking war.
I mean, you can think of maybe one a year where there's been a knockout where, like, a spectacular, like, Uriah Hall or like people that just throw crazy things, and you think, like the Benson Henderson cage walk all these years ago. Like, if you're on the cusp of it, you're not going to go out there and go, "Oh, I'm just going to try and do something crazy." You're like, I want to establish myself. It's not like a one and done.
Mikhailov has a fucking hard matchup. Oh my god, they gave him Juice from CKB.
But Mikhailov, like, he's one of those guys, just an absolute natural.
He's a great fighter. I watched him at Hex. He lost the fight. This was like 2 or 3 fights ago, but it was a great fight. But that Juice, they just throwing him in the deep end straight away. It's gonna be good for him. If he beats Kevin, I can't remember his first name, but if he beats Juice or Juice, however you say it, that's huge for him.
But it's we're not really getting the exposure down here at the UFC because it's not big for the American markets. They don't want to be watching shows. And like, you look at during COVID, like, I'm not an AFL fan at all, but the smartest thing the AFL could have done was put games on a Saturday morning and Sunday morning. It would be in prime time in America. I had a mate in Texas. He's like, "I'm just watching Korean soccer because there's nothing else on."
I actually love watching Americans react to footy.
You
don't realise how athletic AFL players are until you see people reacting to it that aren't used to it.
Yeah, and then it was funny because a lot of people here say, "Oh, NFL players wear pads so they're pussies." I'm like, okay.
They're running a lot faster and hitting a lot harder.
I'm like, would you let Mike Tyson punch you with a 12-ounce glove on? No. I'm like, but it's padding.
Yeah.
But no, it's
like, I wouldn't... if you were to stand over there and I wouldn't even run into you with you stopping me. You'd fucking break my collarbone. And you would be a small NFL player.
Yeah, over the gym over there, I'm 6'4". I think I was about maybe mid-90 kilos back then.
You'd be
I was the smallest guy in the gym. Like, some of the offensive linemen, they have all you can eat 3 times a day, and all they do is squat and bench press and deadlift. And for a 21-year-old guy to be 350 pounds, that's 165 kilos.
Oh, what's that guy? DK Metcalf, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, mate, I've never ever been attracted to a man, but this bloke has the most insane rig I've ever seen.
He played for Mississippi State, and then he got drafted by the Seahawks, and he's one of those guys that's just... He's built. And there was a video of him the other day with a retired defensive end called Aaron Darnold, and DK's bragging about how he could bench more than Darnold. He's like, "How much can you bench press?" And Darnold goes 500 pounds, and DK's like, "All right."
These blokes, they have like a competition in the combine for like, is it like 200 pounds for how many reps they can do?
Yeah, so it's
200 pounds is roughly like 95 kilos.
Yeah, the main things for the combine is the 40-yard dash, the bench press. You've got the high jump, the long jump. You've got like drills where they're catching and running, but there's probably about 3,000, 4,000 college football players a year in America
to stand out,
and only 1% make it to the NFL, and that's not like as in playing. That's make it to the draft, and there's 7 rounds of a draft between 32 teams, and there's a lot of undrafted agents, and a lot of them aren't even getting picked. And if you think like, Jared Hayne is obviously going to go down to infamy for what he's been doing in his off time, but you think one of the best rugby players in the country at that time couldn't even last a pre-season at the San Francisco 49ers. Like, And that's
A couple AFL players have gone over to be like punters, haven't
yeah.
they?
So Brad Wing plays for the Seattle Seahawks. There's another player that plays for the Cardinals. Eddie Maguire, the Collingwood host, his son was the punter for Ohio State that won the college championship last week.
Really?
And so, but punters are not the position where you get drafted. They just draft ends because most
Pretty cruisy job on the field.
it's literally
Get paid a couple million a year to kick a footy.
Yeah, and it all comes down because I was in college over there. We had a football and we were kicking out the front of the calf one day, and these Americans what are you guys doing?
It's so
kicking a
natural.
football, and you got a Division 1 athlete that's built like DK Metcalf that can run, throw, jump, everything. Try and teach to kick a football.
Yeah.
They're like, what do I do?
It's so foreign. I've always wondered if how an elite AFL player would go as what's the one that runs and catches?
Wide receiver.
Yeah, because the catching, I don't know, it's a lot harder because they're cutting angles so quickly and they got someone following them. But sometimes when they fumble the ball, I'm like, an AFL player would have caught that.
You look at a 19-year-old AFL player compared to a 19-year-old college player.
It's a different human being.
It's
a different human being.
Yeah, and that's not a knock on Australia. I think that's just the fact
just
that
different builds.
Say for instance, over in Texas high school football, they have stadiums that hold about 20 or 30,000.
I was going to say college football and basketball are actually bigger sports than the AFL.
So the Texas Longhorns, they have a stadium that they sell to 100,000 people every week, and just imagine here, that's the equivalent of an SANFL game selling 100,000 tickets a week.
Fuck.
And it's insane. And you look at 21, 22-year-olds in American football players, their body build compared to an AFL player here, there's no comparison.
The same. And so for someone who watches NFL or American football, is Tom Brady just a freak athlete, or is that normal for
absolutely not.
But for a quarterback to be doing it for that long and be that successful, is he like a real outlier? Or is he overrated in your opinion?
Overrated.
Ooh,
I know.
Really?
So here's the thing with Tom Brady. You look at, he was selected 197 in the draft because wasn't fast, wasn't athletic. Now average quarterbacks in his day his last contract, say for instance, average quarterbacks was about $30 to $40 million a year. He was saying, my wife's a billionaire, pay me half of that. I'll get all my mates to come with me. If you look at his stats in the past few years, so
he built teams.
Exactly. It's not where Jordan would dominate everything, physical, defense, offensive. Brady was great, but he was very smart. But he wasn't an athletic guy that you see a lot of the new quarterbacks coming out, where Jaden Daniels, the Commanders,
just a great game sense.
Yeah, a great game manager, for instance. So I know there's going to be a lot of people Tom Brady, but my son, when he's naughty, I always say, who you been naughty like? He's like the Joker and Tom Brady. I'm like, exactly. So
that Joker's a freak, isn't he?
No, as in the Joker, the Batman character.
Oh no! What's his name? The guy that he's what's his name? Oh, he has a funny nickname. They on the Tom Brady wrote Gronk.
Oh, Gronkowski.
Gronkowski, he's freak. He seems like he's pretty good.
Well, again, when he was 21 years old, he was 120 kilos of solid muscle.
It's crazy.
It's just when you've got high schools and colleges that dedicate millions of dollars a year to developing athletes, you're going to have different nature. I mean, just imagine here if our universities over here had specialized programs for
footy players.
Just imagine what could happen here. But that's why the Australian talent on the scene is, going great guns. You think 20 years ago or maybe before then, early 2000s for UFC, just imagine if they ever said that a Dagestani or a Australian would be a world champion. They'd be like, they don't have wrestlers there. They don't have strikers there. And look who's dominating. You had at one stage, you had Whittaker, Adesanya, Volk.
Oh man, that was so nice. And now it's the reign of the Duggies. That's what it is. And it's so. And do you know what? I think the Russian/Dagestani takeover of the UFC is the most powerful dynasty in the UFC since Brazil.
Wrestling,
insane.
Look at the chain wrestling. Look at how Khabib just absorbed Conor. Conor couldn't do anything.
Islam that's just eating people, and then you got Usman Nurmagomedov from the PFL. Did you watch the fight he had with that bloke Hughes on the weekend?
Not on the weekend.
Best fight PFL has ever seen. Just such a tit-for-tat fight. But this is Usman Nurmagomedov is a striker. He's actually not even a grappler, and it's fun to see.
Well, the best is when you see a lot of the Dagestani guys actually go to America and strike. They can out-wrestle anyone. But when you mix striking with wrestling, and it's
So you're
scary.
stuffed everywhere. It's just you're not safe anywhere.
Well, look at some of the. Look at, say, Matt Hamill. Like, he was a collegiate wrestler.
Yeah.
You've got Brock Lesnar was a collegiate wrestler. Look at the guys that just spent all through their college just wrestling, and look how easy it was for them to transition, because the hardest thing for them is obviously grappling and the weight cut. Like, seeing so many people the hours before a fight that have had a bad cut, you look at them and you think,
oh man,
you haven't done this
Islam
before.
looked fucking terrible on the scale his last fight. He's obviously always looks like that, but he needs to move up. I imagine that will be his last fight at 155. He's so drawn in. Do you see a lot of that? You obviously attend, or do you attend the weigh-ins and stuff for DFC?
I got young kids, mate, so it's hard, and they're usually on a Friday afternoon at like 4:30 where I'm at work. So
I was going to say, I hope weight cutting slowly transitions into more natural weights rather than trying to weight bully people.
or even like there's promotions that have started having super middleweight, super lightweight.
Yeah,
things
just
like
more
that.
divisions. Just two more, like a 140, 150, like in between the big ones. Like 170 to 185 is a huge fucking disparity.
Yeah.
Like, just put one in between.
And I haven't seen too many super heavyweight fights lately, but they're always kind of fun to watch for a round.
Australia is just not a very big country, eh? Like, we're a very small man country, like 60 to 80 kilos. Like, you can get obviously the outliers like Brando and stuff, but there's not many natural heavyweights in Australia.
Well, before I lifted weights, I was 6'4", 75 kilos. Now I'm 112.
Mm.
And I lost a kidney when I was younger, and when I was training with Turner, I was like, maybe if I go hard for a couple of years, I might have an amateur fight, but I couldn't cut weight. Like, it would be bad for my body. And when you walk around at 110 kilos, like,
It's funny. I put on so I get my missus into the fights now because she's never really seen them, and so I'll make her watch fights for me sometimes, and I'll be like, "How much do you think that guy weighs?" Like a Kamaru Usman. And she's like, what, like 95 kilos? I'm like, nah, he weighs in at like fucking 78.
yeah, and it's insane, because like the extent they put on their body, like when they stopped doing like the blood transfusions and the
Yeah.
IVs, like
I don't know why IVs are illegal.
It's one of those things. It comes down to fighter safety. Like, if someone's dying on the scale and you can try to get them back as quickly and as healthy as possible, like if someone's collapsed after a weight cut, you can't just force feed them water. But look at Pereira, for instance.
I don't know how I was just going to say how the fuck on earth he ever made weight
At
is
185, and then he fights at 230.
beyond me. Like, that will always be the biggest mystery in MMA to me. It's like, where did he lose it? Like, was he playing tricks on the scale? It's just impossible.
Do the Cormier towel hold.
It doesn't register with me at how he can do that.
I don't see him and Jones happening. I just don't.
I don't think it'll happen. I think Jones retires. I don't think he fights Aspinall.
No,
I think I would love to see it, and I honestly think Jones would win against Aspinall. I just don't think the risk is worth the reward for him.
Yeah, I just don't think that Jones ever fought a guy that's much bigger than him, that's as
More
fast as him before.
more athletic, just a natural heavyweight. Just Tom Aspinall's a freak.
Think of 20 years ago, if we said a Brit would be the UFC heavyweight champion, you think, no.
Never.
Like, I never thought I'd see the day where there'd be an Australian taking out the UFC title, just because of
A dominant one, like dominations.
Just the disadvantage we have against all the countries where sports completely bred into them. So look at I think it's South Korea, for instance. Like, they have hardly any street violence because everyone's taught taekwondo all through school, and people go, oh, I know how to fight, but so does this guy.
I don't want to fight him.
Yeah, because it's a coin flip.
Do you know how many fights I wouldn't have got in when I was younger if I knew that automatically everyone knows how to fight? Like, if I was in town, I would have been on my best behaviour all the time.
Yeah.
But even watching street violence now just actually makes me wince in pain.
It's always
It's so much more violent than normal. Like, it's just so violent, unnecessarily
it's
violent.
The way you see a guy square up, you're like, oh my god, this idiot. Like, I've seen the past few weeks, we've been at a beach with my family, and I've seen young people fighting, and it's not just one-on-one. It's literally like one guy swings and 5 other people jump in. And I remember, like, when I started like getting to MMA heavily, I was kickboxing at a gym once a week, and I was going to Trinity on weekends to train. And I rocked up one night with a black eye at boxing, and my coach was warming up. He basically walked all through the class like, come over here. What's up? He's like, how'd you get your black eye? I'm like, oh, sparring on the weekends. Oh, good, come back in. Because if people think that there's, with fight gyms, oh, they just go there to fight, but I can only assume that if Miles or found out that someone from his club was at a punch on in town the weekend, he'd be like, get out.
Wouldn't be happy about it.
Yeah, he'd be like, right, well, this isn't us.
Just makes the gym look bad. It makes and do you know what? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Like sometimes violence is very unavoidable. Depends how much the other person's pushing. Like sometimes you really genuinely will have to defend yourself, and shit will happen.
Yeah.
But if you're just going out and being a dickhead and caving people's heads in because you know you can, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I had someone once reach out to me. They said, "Oh, can you help my nephew get into a martial arts club?" And I called him and said, "Hey man, like, where do you live? And what do you learn?" He goes, "I just want to learn how to fight people." And I just said, "Oh mate, well, I'm not going to help you out then, mate." So
it's a good skill to learn from a young age.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say wrestling. Put your kids into fucking wrestling or jiu-jitsu the second they want to do something.
Oh, it's something like jiu-jitsu that's not going to be damaging to their body, and it's going to learn control. And especially like the area of law that I do, I've said to my wife, like, as soon as my kids are in primary school, they're doing the martial arts.
They have to.
Because, if someone tries to take them, they need to learn how to scratch and claw and, weak spots, because it's...
Jiu-jitsu is good because you get there's a progression system built in through the belts, whereas like Muay Thai and boxing, you don't have that progression system.
When you're young, you want to see you're actually
you want to physically see like, oh, I'm a yellow belt. I think fucking kids have like yellow. They got different belt schemes, but
it's like you hear funny things where someone's like, oh, you're a black belt in BJJ. Oh, my 8-year-old's a black belt in karate. It's like
it's very different. Do you know what though? If your kid wants to do karate, let him do fucking karate. At least it's something. And it's a very good start for discipline.
Exactly. You look at this day and age. I remember when I was young, you were scared of teachers, scared of police officers, and how many people do we see on TV mouthing off at police officers? And it's one of those things where it's more people need to learn how to control.
It's just learning when to shut up and learning like what battles to choose.
Well, someone asked me a while ago, like, "Oh, you're a lawyer. What would you do if a cop ever pulled you over? And would you challenge him?" I said,
"Be fucking nice to him."
I got pulled over a few weeks ago, and I took a corner and I didn't see a cop car driving past, so I quickly braked and said, "Oh, sorry." And they pulled me over and they said, "Hey, like, you took that corner a bit sharp. We'll give you a warning." I'm like, "Oh, sorry. Here's my driver's license." And I didn't do the whole sovereign citizen thing of I'm not driving, I'm traveling. It's cops don't want to arrest people. They don't want to do paperwork. They don't want to go to court. They just want to be like, right, just be sensible, be safe. And
my friend was a police prosecutor. He works at the fisheries now, and he said, "I'm so sick of people pulling the sovereign citizen shit on me."
It's insane.
I didn't realize people actually did it, but he was saying you would not believe how many people try and claim that they're fucking sovereign citizens.
There's not one court in Australian legal history that's ever given a sovereign citizen a win of their thing, because the laws don't apply to me.
It's not real.
It's not real. I don't consent to that in Parliament. The big one is Australia is a corporation, and I can't be fined because a fine's a contract. You have to consent to be fined. It's like literally you've got a driver's license.
You have a birth certificate.
Yeah. So no, it's like your friend probably moved to the fisheries, probably a lot happy now, because I've got friends that are prosecutors. I've got a friend that's a judge, and it's constant like looking over your shoulder for them. And even with me, my area, I'm always constantly like, all right, well, I'm out with my kids, and I've actually been out once years ago with my nephew. We would have been about maybe 6 or 7 at the time. I was walking with my mum and my nephew, and someone that I was suing was walking near us, and I said to my mum, "Take him and leave." She's like, "What?" I'm like, "Take him and walk away and just pretend you don't know me." And with a few young kids of my own now, that's where I'm starting to be like, all right, well, I'm a bit of a target.
You're very public on social media about it too.
Oh, it's just about talking about what's happened. Like, I'm trying to use my platform to create change. Like, imagine if I was being like, oh, marijuana is evil, like something like that, where most people would be like, go away. But I'm trying to do something, be like, hey, I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to stamp this out. And again, the only people that have any issue with me are usually the sex offenders themselves.
Well, Andrew, it's been a pleasure. You do have a meeting today.
I do.
So we won't keep it too long, but we will run this back maybe another 6 months or so.
Am I going to be the first ever third time guest, am I?
I've had, you'll be I only have 2 people that I regularly have on, so you'll be the first guest outside my regulars 3 times.
I feel
But
special.
Hopefully, maybe we can even work together on a future DFC. We'll see how we go.
Have a chat with the boss man.
We'll have a chat with the boss man. Easy, Andrew. Thank you so
Always
much
a
for
pleasure.
coming on. It's always a pleasure.